happy Mother's Day to you anyway, because you were blessed with her. So anyway, appreciate you reading here. We're going to have ourselves a textual study of Joshua. As you probably know, we're reading the bulletin, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more in a bit. Before we begin, I do want to remind you that we're all studying Joshua now. There's another class where they pick topics each week, and they kind of have more of a topic. We'll leave that. That's the difference between that class and this one. This one is going to be more textual, more in the vein of not verse by verse, but certainly chapter by chapter. So that's what we're doing in here. Was out last week. Did go to my 50th high school reunion. Yes, I'm an ancient. And it was very cute. Yes, to answer Gary's question, I did win the best hair award. Let's pray together before we begin. Father, we're so thankful to you. What can we say? You have given us your beautiful creation. You have given us your Son and your Spirit to abide within us. You have given us each other in this church fellowship and fellowship in your Son. You have blessed us abundantly in this country. And you have given each one of us the measure of health and joy that we have in our lives. We owe everything to you. You are good to us. We ask you to bless us now in this study. In Jesus' name. Okay, we're in the book of Joshua. And what do you remember most about Joshua? 2 or 3 things.
He followed Moses.
He followed Moses and followed him, not just after him, but followed him. Okay, what else do you remember about Joshua? Courageous. What?
Led the conquest of Canaan.
Conquest of Canaan. We remember the first city where Joshua fought the battle of. Yes, indeed, he did, and named a song after that. Well, anyway, we remember Rahab. What else do we remember about Joshua?
Son of Nun.
He was a son of none, which means he had neither father nor mother. I've been waiting to use that. Okay, Joshua's son of none. Anything else you remember about the book of Joshua? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Too bad. First you and then you.
Good spy.
He was a good spy.
That was mine.
Didn't he steal your idea? Okay. All right. Great spy. Yes, sir.
He stood up against the crowd. The other 10 spies. He stood up for what God said.
Yes. So, a man of courage in many ways. Isn't it funny how we remember like the first 1 or 2 chapters? And then maybe 3 or 4 chapters, and then it's like, it just kind of blurs after that. It's because, you get into, in the latter parts of the book, the real interesting stuff like who gets what land and what the borders of each land are. Man, it's a real snooze fest, let me tell you. But we're going to walk through that and look at it. But if those are the only things you remember about Joshua, yes, sir.
One more.
One more.
Toward the end of his life, he said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord."
Perhaps the most famous thing Joshua ever said. Yes, sir. Dave? Did you have something else? Don, did you have something else? That was. This isn't your day. Everybody's stealing your ideas. Okay. If those are the only things you remember about Joshua, we're going to do more of a deep dive than that. Because there is a huge amount of stuff in Joshua in terms of covenant relationship and continuity. And so if we just remember those few little events, fair enough, good enough, they're exciting, but there's more to it than that. Let's look real quickly at real quick Hebrew history. These dates are approximate, except when you get down to about 586 and 721. Those are pretty much solid. But this gives you an idea of the flow of biblical history. You have Abraham, who's called out of Ur of the Chaldees. And what's really important here that we'll be talking about a little later, is the promise. I'm going to give you every piece of land that you set your foot on. And not only that, I'm going to make your name great. And in you, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. This is big. This is huge. This man who was a pagan worshiper and who Yahweh calls out of Ur of Chaldea. So we have Israel going to Egypt. We have then the Exodus and the conquest, Judges, Solomon, the divided kingdom. The end gets sad. 721 BC, the northern kingdom gets chomped up by Assyria. 586 BC, the southern kingdom gets chomped up by Babylon. Right here is this tremendous failure of the people to live up to the covenant. We're going to see more and more of this in Joshua. Here is where we are. We have the Exodus. Brother Joshua is coming out of Egypt in that Exodus. The conquest of Canaan, Joshua, that's where we are. It is the Bronze Age, about 1406. The Judges comes after that. And then, of course, this northern kingdom and southern kingdom destroyed. Those are brackets. Those are brackets because promises made, promises kept, promises rejected. Now we're going to get boring. Okay. It may come as a surprise to you that the Hebrew Bible has a different order of book than our English Bible. Same books, different order. We have the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. Everybody knows that, right? Of course you do. The Torah, first 5 books of Moses. The Nevi'im are the prophets. We usually think of the prophets as what? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, those guys. Oh, that's not how the Hebrews look at it. We have Joshua, Judges, and Samuel. 1st, 2nd Samuel is one book. We have Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings is one book. Notice that they are the former prophets. Then we have the latter prophets, that is the writing prophets. Isaiah talks about Israel. Jeremiah talks about Judah. Ezekiel talks about Judah in captivity. And then you have the 12, which is a new book. And then you have the Ketuvim, Psalms, Proverbs, Jobs, the rest of the stuff. And they're read on a cycle in the synagogue every year. Why is this important? Notice the highlighting that we have right there. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings. Right here at the Torah. Think with me just a second. In the Torah, God calls Abraham. He makes promises to him. He lives out those promises in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. And in Deuteronomy, he gives this final thing saying, whatever you people do, when you go into the land, I want you to obey all the laws of this covenant. Moses dies. And then what do you pick up on the first few verses of Joshua? Moses, my servant, is dead. Keep this in mind. The Torah, the Nevi'im, the prophets, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, the Ketuvim, poetry, wisdom, and pure, Psalms, Jobs. This is going to make real cool sense now. In Luke 24:44, Jesus says to his disciples, this is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that was written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. And I always thought, Jesus, you got to mix up, dude. The Psalms comes before the prophets. No, Jesus had exactly right because he was a Hebrew. The law of Moses, the prophets, the Psalms. Jesus was a Jew. You must never forget that. But what he's saying in this passage right after his resurrection is the whole scope of the Old Testament history is about me. Everything that you read, beginning from Genesis, going up to Malachi in our Bible, is about me. So, let's go back. Let's look at another thing. We have the Torah, which is the beginning, and then we have Joshua. Joshua is the fulfillment. I want you to catch this with me. In Genesis through Deuteronomy, we have the beginnings of God's foundation with his people. In Joshua, we have him beginning to fulfill that covenant. And then the former prophets, Samuel and Kings, you have the people living out the covenant. Are they going to be able to remain faithful? And how did that end? Sad. But Yahweh remained faithful to his covenant. He brought them back. 5:16 or thereabouts. Now, there's another way to put this. When you and I look at Joshua, we're looking at the pivot of Hebrew history. The law, you have the prophets, the kings, First and Second Samuel. But Joshua is the herald. Joshua is where God's promises begin to be fulfilled. That's why when I want you to see this, I don't want you to see just these exciting stories of Joshua and crossing over the Jordan, of Rahab the prostitute, and the walls of Jericho falling down. That's what this book is about. But this book is about the covenant being fulfilled. Yahweh has acted in history and has given what he said way back in the time of Abraham, 1,000 years before this. This is a powerful book. And so we now have the outcome of the covenant, Judges, Samuel, Kings. Joshua's outline is really easy. First off, we'll cross the Jordan. Easy enough. Except the Jordan is a flood stage right then, but we'll talk about that later. We take the land. 5-12. That's talking about the fall of Jericho. It's talking about the central, southern, and northern campaigns. Then we allot the land. And this is where it really gets, well, boring. In fact, if you want to flip in there, let's look at chapter 13 of the book of Joshua. And I'll show you what you're in for. So we have, let's look at chapter 15. The allotment for the tribe of Judah, clan by clan, extended down to the territory of Edom to the desert of Zin and the stream south. Their southern boundary started from the bay at the southern end of the Salt Sea, crossed south of the Scorpion Pass, y'all know where that is, continued on to Zin, etc., etc. And the whole 14 chapters 13 to 22 are like that. But there's some nuggets in there. That's why I always encourage people, work through those boring passages. You know, when you get to the book of Numbers and you see all those names, it's like Jehoshaphat did such and such, and Ben-Hashaphat, and it's like, oh man, can you just, yes, I'm dying here. Work through that because you're going to find some nuggets. Anyway, we allot the land, and then Joshua says, chapter 23, chapter 24, goodbye. It's really interesting, and will come into play here, that the books of the Torah and the book of Joshua interference. You understand? In Genesis, who's the last dude to die? And he says, and when you leave out here, take my bones with you. Joseph. In Deuteronomy, now Moses, the servant of the Lord. And then you end the book of Joshua, Joshua, the servant of the Lord. Man, that's sad. I mean, you're just boring me here, aren't you? In terms of the covenant and continuity of God's blessings. People pass. People fade. Yahweh's word stands forever. Yahweh fulfills his purposes, his plans, and his promises over 1,000 years of Hebrew history. And what that means is that Yahweh, whose covenant and plans continue, fulfills them even for you this day. We will pass from this place. Yahweh's word stands forever. This is the cool stuff. Okay. Here's what we're going to be looking at. We have 12 weeks. This is more than 12. I didn't number them, but we're going to prepare to take the land. Very important what we do here. We cross over covenant and preparation and affirmation. Jericho. Was Jericho a success or a failure? Yes. Yes, it was. If you remember the story of Ai and the story of Brother Achan who stole the treasure stuff, it was a failure. And now right here, you notice this next one does not have a chapter. It's because as we go into the book itself, we have Yahweh's commands to utterly exterminate the Canaanites. Again, women, children, in the case of Jericho, animals, everything. And so, you really have to come to grips or wrestle with how Yahweh, don't love saying that God is love, how Yahweh can command the extermination, the genocide of this group of people. And I trust Yahweh. I believe in Him. I trust in His goodness and graciousness. This is a problem. This is a real problem, and it's one that our unbelieving friends like to upchuck to us. How could Yahweh order the extermination of Canaanites? I think we're going to have to come to grips with that. I'm not sure that I'll be able to grip it for you, but we're going to have to at least say, yes, this is a problem. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time on the problem of holy war and the problem of carrying the utter devotion, destruction of the city. Then we're going to talk about the central, southern, and northern campaigns, the defeated kings list, and that's going to go quickly. The defeated kings list is, guess what that is? It's a list of defeated kings. Yes. There's going to be several of them. We're going to talk about the land east of the Jordan, west of Jordan, allotment by tribes, cities of refuge. You don't like that. Anybody know what cities of refuge are? Yeah.
People accidentally kill somebody to run and hide until next high priest.
Oh, you can do the high priest thing in there. Good for you. Yeah. If you accidentally kill someone, you could go to one of these cities and the Redeemer of blood would not get you. Here's the Redeemer of blood. If you kill somebody, the Redeemer or the Redeemer of blood, guess what he gets to do to you? He kills you. He's family. You know, it's just business. You know? You don't want to get killed, so you go to a city of refuge, three on the right, on the east side, three on the west side. So we'll talk about that. The eastern tribes, and there's a problem at the end. And then Joshua's farewell address, chapter 22 to 24, which includes a renewal of covenant. What do you think about that? Moses is dead. In case you ever want to picture Moses, that is the real, one and only genuine Moses. There will never be another like him. So let it be written and so let it die. Look at Deuteronomy, the very end of Deuteronomy, verse 32. This Moses has passed. By the way, where was Moses buried? You don't know. Thank you. He was buried somewhere on Mount Nebo. Who did his funeral service for him? Isn't that stupid? God loved Moses, and he says, "I'm going to take care of the place. Come on home. I'll bury you." Isn't that stupid? Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those miraculous signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of Israel. The man is unsurpassed. And think for a moment, who appears with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration? When Jesus is transformed, there's Elijah and Moses. And whose song do we sing? to the Lamb. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. Yes, we do. He is unsurpassed. So, he freed the people. He went down, he performed the miracles, he freed the people, led them out of the promised land, led them to the Red Sea. He gave them the law at Sinai, or at least he was the mediator of the law. This is huge. He interceded for them. What happened when the people, you may remember this, what happened when the people had seen that Moses was going from Mount Sinai, he was gone for 40 days, and they're starting to say, what happened to this guy? And what did they do? They made a golden calf, in which Aaron was complicit, by the way. Moses interceded for the people. God was ready to wipe them out. They already busted the covenant. He hadn't even yet. It was still fresh on the plate. So he interceded for them. He led them through the wilderness for 40 years. He transitioned them from slave to free. And none of us have that concept in our mind of what it must have been like to be a slave. You don't own you. You don't decide what you're going to do in the morning. You don't decide what you're going to do at night, or even if you sleep tonight. You don't have possessions. You are owned. And so to transition from that concept of, well, what do we do now? What do we do today? To, you're free. What a huge cultural shift this had to have been, and Moses led them through that. Nobody talked with God like Moses talked with God. Face to face, as a friend to a friend. He was the only leader in national memory. You and I are used to a new president at least every 8 years, if not every 4 years. Certainly the opportunity to change elected officials every 4 years. Most of us has been around, judging by the age here, we've been at least 3, 4, or 5 presidents. Okay, we'll change presidents. This man's been with them 40 years. He is the leader. He is Israel. He is the representative of Yahweh. There is no one like him. And he is passed at the worst possible time. We are on the banks of the Jordan. We are supposedly about to go in and conquer this land. Moses died. What? What are we going to do now? The only thing I can think of is the time, I'm sure you all remember when Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, right? He had been president for 3 terms. He was right in the middle of World War II. I mean, this guy was 12. He dies. What a shock to the nation. He wasn't supposed to die. And Harry Truman took over and did a good job. It took 40 years. What are we going to do now? Fortunately, Moses has an aide that he has groomed for this position. This is Joshua's LinkedIn picture. You can tell that it's his LinkedIn picture because it has the official logo up there. Joshua's original name was Hoshea. It means salvation, or he saves. Moses changed his name. He changed his name to Yahushua. Yahweh saves. He wanted everybody to know and to be sure to see that we're not just saying he saves, although we know who he is, but rather that Yahweh saves. And so he renames Joshua. By the way, there's a guy in the New Testament named after him. You probably know, right? Yes, Jesus. Joshua's LinkedIn passage says he's open to new challenges to grow my tested skills as a spy, warrior, author, vice president, and community organizer. And you look back at Joshua's his resume, and he was indeed all of these things. He was Moses' aide de camp. He knew slavery. We'll talk about that a little bit more. He wrote, we think, a lot of the book of Joshua. He was certainly a community organizer. He was a spy. Was Joshua a slave? Yeah. Joshua was with Moses in the Exodus. He was with Moses at the very first battle they fought. The Amalekites came out to attack the Israelites. Don't know why, but they earned a bad reputation for that. And Moses tells Joshua, I want you to get a group of guys together, I want you to go fight. They did. This is where Moses' arms was held up. You may remember that Old Testament story. He was Moses' aide since his youth, the Bible said. He was one of the 12 original spies. We are tromping up through the land. We are almost ready to cross over the Jordan. We send in 12 spies, come tell us what's going on in the land. And the spies come back, they bring this beautiful fruit, everything is exciting, but they say what? You know what? There is no way that we're going to be able to do it. Joshua and says, wait, we can do this. Well, as a result, Joshua wanders in the wilderness also for 40 years. I imagine he got frustrated. Can you imagine you could have been in the land, you could have been raising your sheep and goats and vineyards, and you're here tromping around in the desert with these flying bags. Amazing. And he was with Moses at Sinai. I want you to think with me just a moment. We read Joshua just so blithely. Like, oh, yeah, next stage in the history. Okay. No. We are here at Yahweh's covenant. We are on the brink of this land that we're supposed to cross over with the Jordan at flood stage. Are we really going to be able to do this? Our parents messed this up big. Are we going to mess it up big? Who's going to lead us now? The land is large and it's well fortified. What are we going to do? And then from a personal perspective, you have this man Joshua and you're thinking, oh yeah, he's got Moses patting him back. He knows this is good. No. This man is undoubtedly filled with awe and some degree of fear. Will he be able to lead them? Sitting right across the river in plain eyesight is one of the largest, most fortified cities in the land. We've already been told that they have giants there. How are we going to get them across? How are we going to take this massive land? For Pete's sake. We got a bunch of nomads here. How are we even going to set up a government? What is that going to look like? We are truly on the brink of a massive excitement, but at the same time, huge disaster. This is what the Israelites. Chapter 1, the very first things. Moses, my servant, is dead. Get up, get ready. In 3 days, you guys are going to cross over. Wow, it's right. I'll give you every place where you set your foot as I promised Moses. If you are Joshua, you have to be flabbergasted. First off, Moses just died. Give us a little break here. Let us kind of get our heads wrapped around this. No. I know you want to weep. I know you're afraid. Get ready. Okay, I'm going to give you every bit of land that I promised and on which you have set your foot. So, okay, there's the handy laser thing. Roughly in here was where they were slaves. They have crossed over the Red Sea. They have meandered around and wandered around in Sinai, gotten the law. And then he says, I'm going to give you this land. It's going to be from the Great Sea, Mediterranean, to the desert, Arabia. It's going to be to Lebanon. It's going to be all the land of the Hittites. That's a question mark because the Hittites may have been just a generic name for the people of the land. If not, he's giving them this part of northern and Turkey. The Hittite Empire is a great empire. I don't think that that's part of it. I think he's talking about here. And to the Euphrates River, right here. So you've got this big swath of land. It's a new part of the Israelite kingdom to the Mediterranean. And so that kind of encompasses it. Now, when did that happen? You're not going to see a full realization of this until the times of David and Solomon. Especially this part, he doesn't give them the land of the Babylonians and the Assyrians, but he does give them to the Euphrates River. By the way, you also, at some point, may run across the term the River of Egypt. Your southern border is going to be the River of Egypt. And so everybody assumes that's the Nile. The River of Egypt is not the Nile. The River of Egypt is the Brook of Egypt. And it's roughly right in there. I like that quick geography lesson. Right now, we ain't there. We're spotting right back there. Okay. So Joshua is struggling. As a leader of a great people, he's already led. He's already been given the pat on the back. He's already given the transition. But notice what he says. No one will be able to stand against you. Joshua, look it up. Yahweh, Yahweh am speaking. I'm with you. As I was with Moses, I'll be with you. A little hint right here. There are 2 or 3 things that are going to happen. The Israelites are going to cross over the Jordan because God rolls the Jordan back. What is that reminiscent of? Exodus. Joshua in chapter 4 or 5 meets with the commander of the army of the Lord. Joshua says, "You force you against us? I'm with nobody. I'm with the Lord's army. Take your shoes off your feet. You're standing on holy ground." Oh, what is that about? In every way, God begins to exalt Joshua. As I was with Moses, I'll be with you, and I will never leave you or forsake you. Isn't it great? I can't emphasize this enough. Notice what he says. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. You'll return from it for right and be successful. Here we go. Folks, this book is about covenant. This book is about fulfillment of the covenant. Yahweh keeping his promises. And he's telling Joshua, don't violate that covenant. You keep with it because if you do, then you're going to be successful. Keep it always on your lips. Talk about it. Meditate on it day and night so that you can be careful to do it. Talk about it, meditate on it, do it. Then you'll be prosperous and successful. So this is a tremendous book about God's faithfulness and the people's faithfulness. Notice that he says, God tells Joshua chapter 1, get ready. In verse 2, you're going to cross over the Jordan, I'm about to give them your land to the Israelites. Now look at verse 10. You have roughly a division of the book here, or of the chapter. Yahweh commissions Joshua. And Joshua says to the people, go throughout the camp, get ready, you're about to cross over. And you have this lovely division of this chapter.
Hey, Harvey, obviously before that, he's speaking the book of the law, so that was basically Moses' books that had already been recorded. That's what it's referring to.
I think so. There are indications that Moses kept records as he went along. And so I think that it may have gotten a little bit of dusting and polishing by the time of Ezra or Nehemiah, but pretty much Joshua has the stuff. He has at least, I think, the book of Deuteronomy, if not the rest of it.
How can you not have, if we give Moses the credit for Genesis,
Through Deuteronomy.
how could Joshua not have everything he had if he was his?
Again, I think he probably did. Now, he's maybe arranged a little bit, maybe polished up a little bit by the time of Ezra. Yes, I think so. But yes, Joshua has the whole deal. But I think as you walk through and you look at what Joshua is cautioned about, you see Deuteronomy sprinkled throughout. And so I think that's what he most go through the camp, tell people, get your provisions ready. Y'all about to go into the promised land. The land your Lord, your God, is giving you for your own. How must this have sounded to the sons and daughters of slaves? How must this have sounded to nomads who have wandered in the wilderness for 40 years? I'm going to give you your land. Wow. You're kidding me. Now, I would like for you to turn to the book of Leviticus. Because this gives you another perspective about the land. Leviticus 25. You remember that the Israelites had all kinds of land laws. You could sell your land, but it was redeemable. And the year of Jubilee, it was given back to its original owners. The land didn't depart from the family. That's part of the Redeemer we talk about, the Redeemer of blood. It was his job to take up the land as well as avenge through death. Here is Yahweh's perspective on the land. Verse 23. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine. Oh, wait, I'm about to give you the land. Yeah, the land is mine. And you, speaking to the children of Israel, are but aliens and my tenants. This is pretty serious in terms of Yahweh's perspective about the land, their ownership of the land. And I think, too, I don't want to get too socio-political here, but maybe just a little tip of the hat toward our attitude toward land, the environment, and creation in general. But this is Yahweh's. And we are aliens and tenants. Aliens and tenants, even to the promised people. This is pretty good stuff. So, you ready? I'm going to give you possession. You're for 3 days. You're about to take on. There is a slight kerfuffle. Kerfuffle is a disturbance, upset, a brouhaha. Look at verses 12 through 15.
Is that a Harvey word? Is that a word?
That's a real word, brother. That's a kerfuffle. Look it up. Yeah. I've earned a few brownie points off the word kerfuffle before. So. Yeah. So it's a disturbance. All right, look at verse. Where is it? I'm going to get on it. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, where is it? Okay. And it would help if I turned to Joshua instead of Deuteronomy. That helps a lot. Okay. To the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. The Lord your God has given you rest, has granted you this land. Your wives, your children, your livestock can stay in the land. Moses gave you peace of the Jordan, but all your fighting men, fully armed, must cross over ahead of your brothers. And you are to help your brothers until the Lord gives them rest. You have to see that fulfillment. Now, here's what happens. In the first wandering around, the children of Israel apparently have stomped around up here. They came up in this area. Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh said, you know what, this is good stuff. This is perfect herd land. This is our herds, our flocks into here. This is a great land. And they say to Moses, don't make us cross over the Jordan with you. And Moses throws a hissy. And you can read about the hissy in Numbers 33. Moses says, how dare you? How dare you not want to go over and take the land that God has given you? What are you guys thinking? Are you rebelling against Yahweh? And they said, no. We'll go. We'll go with you. We'll fight with you. We'll make sure the land is subjugated and just give us this as our inheritance. And so Joshua is calling them to mind of the promise made back in Numbers. You guys said you go. Saddle up. Get your sword sharpened. We're ready to go. And he said, okay. That, by the way, is a picture, obviously, of this final settled land. If you ever want to know, as Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh on this side, Northern Kingdom right here, Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, Issachar, so forth. Oh, wait, where's the tribe of Levi? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that that land was as arid and inhospitable then as it is now?
My gut is probably not. It was a land flowing with milk and honey. You have your own vineyards, vine, your fig tree, blah, 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 the usual selling point of the land. And so I think it was probably a little nicer than it is now. Who knows?
One more question. So was
Oh, no, you're not going to ask me this hard one, are you?
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go into some area. So was the settling east of the river, was that off the table at this point? Was everything going to be west of the river? And is it sort of a midstream request that could keep things, or?
It looks like that this was a midstream request to begin with. And then Moses kind of like, yeah, we already won it. It is good, herd land, but you guys aren't going to weasel out fighting. By the way, where's the tribe of Levi? They didn't get land because Yahweh is their portion. And so they were scattered in several towns throughout the land. Okay. Joshua, be strong and courageous. You will lead these people to inherit the land. And again, be strong and very courageous. And again, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. For Yahweh your God will be with you wherever you go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, the men of Manasseh and Gad, Reuben started. Anyway, what they said was, you be strong. We'll go with you. You do what the Lord tells you. By the way, if nobody can do that, we'll kill them. So, and this is, by the way, a thing in Deuteronomy 31, 6 through 8, it's also a promise. And so you think to yourself, man, in my conquests, in my challenges, I wish Yahweh would save me. Okay. Be strong and courageous.
Hey, Harvey, this is probably an elementary question where everybody else is here, but where did all these people come from that were in Canaan and Canaan? Where did all these people come from?
I think your long answer is in Genesis chapter 10. You have the table of nations. You have the different families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These were the Canaanites, which were part of the Midian tribes, I believe. Any? No? Yeah. So they are part of that table of nations, and also my guess is in the Tower of Babel, whenever God confused the languages, He not only confused the languages, but people began to spread and replenish the earth as He had intended to begin with. So, and then plus they were in the plains of Shinar, which is Babylon and Assyria area, so they would migrate down through there.
But did the Israelites did that?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah. Did this Moses' group and Joshua and the Israelite people, did they completely
sore spot. Because, yeah, they took it. Yeah, they occupied it. No, they didn't totally exterminate everybody. And it was going to be a problem later on, as in the book of Judges. And so, man, I wish Yahweh would say something to me when I got these challenges. Guess what? Keep your lives free from the love when you get what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Isn't that beautiful? Write down these promises to Joshua. God has spoken to you throughout the thousands of years and said, I'm with you. I'm not going to forsake you. Be of good courage. Yahweh is with you. Man, what a powerful, powerful statement that is for us, coming out of the history of that ancient time. Okay, so we're poised at the, yes sir?
One more question. As I thought about these things you brought forward to us, could you speculate just a little bit on how old Joshua is as we're getting ready for battle? Because like you mentioned, he actually saw slavery.
Yep.
He saw 40 years in the wilderness. So theoretically, he wouldn't just be a young, energetic dude.
He's a young guy, probably about my age.
Yes.
Here's what I'm guessing, and it is just a guess. That he is probably in his 20s when he hooks up with Moses, sees the Exodus. There's a year or so that they're tromping around, getting the law and all of that. And so he's probably in his early to mid-60s at this point. And that's just based on that line of math there. He does die at, 110, I think it says. Which would fit well with the chronology that we set forth. It took, roughly 40 years to take the land.
As I thought, when you put that frame up, I'm thinking about Moses. They probably had 40 plus years, they probably hired Moses being a leader. They might have needed different blood, maybe to lead in this campaign, possible.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a young, energetic, new thing. He was sort of stable. He was somebody basically all along.
Yeah.
He could have had time. It's a little bit the old administration.
Yeah, it was a nice overlap. Young enough to be effective, but old enough to see the good old days, so to speak. The good old days when we tramped around in the desert for 4 years. Okay, so next week, we're sending spies back in. I don't know whether Joshua learned a lesson from Moses or not. We sent him 12. We're sending a couple of dudes. Here we're going to see the story of Rahab, one of our favorite bad girls of the Bible, a prostitute, and how her expression of faith in Yahweh saves herself and her family. This is one of the best remembered stories in the book of Joshua, I think, aside from the conquest of Jericho. So, next week, read chapter 1, kind of refresh your brain. Chapter 2. Sister Rahab. How dare I call her sister? She was a prostitute. Yeah. She was a woman of faith. Any questions, comments, further thoughts, explorations? All right, Lord willing.